Hello and welcome to this Red Gaming Tech video, myself Amata, where as always I'm here with the latest from the tech world in the last 24 or so hours. Today I'm going to kick off proceedings with some very interesting statements from Nvidia about the sales of Pascal versus Turing. Now they made these comments during their recent Investor Day, and one of the most interesting comments they made was how Turing has apparently sold a lot more than Pascal in the first 8 weeks of desktop revenue. Now, Turing has taken a bit of a beating in the eyes of the public and, of course, in the eyes of investors as well. And they're undoubtedly trying to restore a little bit of confidence here. Now, Pascal, as we know, turned out to be one of the best architectures from Nvidia. It was very strong all round, and of course many people probably still have a Pascal GPU inside their machine. But what we can actually see from all of their stats is that Turing GPUs actually did better than Pascal initially. And if you look at the figures that we can see on the screen, Nvidia are basically claiming that Turing sold 45% more than Pascal in the first 8 weeks. Now obviously one of the reasons why Nvidia have such a problem with Turing is there's obviously a multitude of factors. It's a very complex topic, a lot of nuance at play, of course, but one of the issues included in that is, of course, the cryptocurrency market and, of course, how it crashed, and that's left with a lot of GPUs being sold onto the second-hand market, and obviously a lot of leftover Pascal GPUs that were never sold due to the decrease in demand. But Nvidia are basically saying that if you remove the impact of crypto, Turing is actually faring again, that almost 45% better than Pascal. Now, interestingly, we also see that 90% of their install base is currently below the performance of the 1660 Ti. So, Nvidia are unsurprisingly trying to sort of tap into the affordable but powerful options of the sort of lower end of their Turing cards, and the 1660 Ti is undoubtedly going to be the sort of flagship of that. They're trying to sort of position that as the bread and butter of their gaming lineup, and are going to be tapping into this install base in the best way that they can, because again it is one of the most affordable graphics cards of their new generation they currently have on the market. As of right now, 2% of their install base has shifted to Turing, where 50% is on Pascal, and obviously that does leave a 48% still on older generations, so they are really looking to push the people still on Pascal onto their less expensive Turing cards, and obviously onto their flagship ones as well for the higher end folks. But a lot of people are not going to be wanting to cough up that sort of money, and I can't really blame them. And obviously get the people who are on the generation prior onto Turing as well. Now they also touted their improvements in gaming laptop sales and how Max-Q has really improved in recent years as well, but their primary focus was unsurprisingly RTX because, well, obviously it's done well in the first 8 weeks in comparison to Pascal, but obviously they're trying to restore confidence and they're trying to really get the sort of lower end fleshed out, because at the start, as I've discussed many times, we literally just had the top end, which, as great as it is very expensive. So they're kind of doing this arguably a little late, but late is better than never, that's what I say. Anywho, we're going to move swiftly on now to Google Stadia, or Stadia, still not sure on the pronunciation. Now, I'm sure those of you who watched my video yesterday have seen, or know what I'm talking about, should I say, and even if you haven't, you've probably heard the news, because Google finally announced Stadia, their game streaming service, or cloud-based gaming to be more exact. But we actually have a bit of a further update on this, as the Google Stadia VP Marge Baker said to Eurogamer that it's actually going to be very easy to develop for. And he said, quote, "We are also helping developers with all the tools, so building for Stadia is really another target for them, together with existing tools in terms of Visual Studios and all the development tools they are using and integrating with their workflow. So developing for Stadia is as simple as developing for PlayStation and Xbox." Now, undoubtedly the biggest concern, the biggest question on everyone's mind is, of course, is the latency actually going to be low enough to make this playable? Because despite Google's massive resources, as I kind of just touched on in my video yesterday, and go watch it if you haven't already, because I discussed all the details about Stadia there, I just don't think there's enough infrastructure really ready yet. Not everyone has access to amazing internet. You know, even in the UK, like if you're outside of a big city, you're pretty much stuffed. And in the US, like certain internet providers just have an absolute monopoly and have no actual reason to provide anything other than a basic as bones service and not to give the sort of very tip-top end. Of course, that is starting to change in some places, but across the world as well, there are various areas that are just not getting very good internet at all. Until this is really addressed, we're not going to see game streaming and cloud gaming reach the sort of critical mass that you might expect. Even with Google's infrastructure, I might be wrong. Baker actually touched on this as well, talking about the improvements that they've made since Project Stream and talking about how they're going to be getting the lowest possible latency. And they said, quote, "It's compression and it's networking. So we are piggybacking a lot of networking work done that has been done by Google infrastructure. BBR, Quick, and WebRTC are the foundation of what we're building on top of. So we can provide not just low latency distribution of the IP packet, but also provide feedback to the source. So the tricks we're talking about ZeniMax using, they can also be used here, and they'll be used to optimize their gameplay. We can predict latency on a frame-by-frame basis and allow them to adjust for that. We will continue to improve, yes. Stream is the first version of our tech. We're investing in terms of improving performance and adapting to latency, and it'll better once we launch." So essentially, it could be that I'm wrong. That yes, our infrastructure still needs work, absolutely, but maybe Google has thought of ways around that, as other than just brute forcing it with massive data centers and this amazing GPU that is apparently better than the PS4 and the Xbox One at launch. Combined, should I say? So yeah, it could very well be possible that they've thought of ways around the problems that I'm addressing. I'm by no means saying that they haven't thought of this, because I'm sure they have. Now, we actually have comments about Stadia from Xbox Phil Spencer. Now, these comments were made in an internal email following Google's GDC keynote, and thanks to Thurrott's Brad Sams, who managed to get their hands on it, it has now been leaked to the public. Of course, there's going to be a link to Thurrott's article in the description below this video, but here is what Phil had to say. Quote, "We just wrapped up watching the Google announcement of Stadia as team here at GDC. The announcement is validation of the path we embarked on 2 years ago. Today we saw a big tech competitor enter the gaming market and frame the necessary ingredients for success as content, community, and cloud. There were no big surprises in their announcement, although I was impressed by the leveraging of YouTube, the use of Google Assistant, and the new Wi-Fi controller. But I want to get back to us. There's been really good work to get us to the position where we are poised to compete for 2 billion gamers across the planet. Google went big today, and we have a couple of months until E3 when we will go big. We have to stay agile and continue to build with our customer at the center. We have the content, community, cloud team, and strategy, and as I've been saying for a while, it's all about execution. This is even more true today." Now, you should obviously take this as a pinch of salt, but I would put faith in this, to be honest. Brad has proven himself to be pretty reliable in the past, and I undoubtedly do believe that Microsoft is basically thinking go big or go home when it comes to E3 this year. Of course, Sony is not going to be there, so if you ask me, this year's E3 is Microsoft's for the taking if they choose to do so. Of course, their sort of main competitor really is going to be Nintendo, who never really do like full-on conferences. They'll of course always do the directs, but if they have enough good announcements, they could steal the show. And they're undoubtedly aware that Sony is probably going to have announcements following E3, but they still want to keep the conversation on Xbox as much as possible. So I have every faith that they're going to be showing us something interesting. I don't think they'll release the full specs of whatever Project Scarlet actually is at E3, but they will definitely show us it, kind of like they did with the Xbox One X, which of course at the time was codenamed Project Scorpio. But of course, it's hard to speculate what these things can actually be. I could very much be wrong. They could turn up on stage, you could say, here's the specs, here's the price, here's the release date, here's a bunch of games, go. That could very well happen, and that would be pretty impressive and would definitely hold people's attention. So what are your guys' thoughts on Google Stadia? I mean, I obviously want to see it on action before I really make judgment. I have my reservations, which I've already discussed, but I definitely think it could be one to watch for sure, but it might be a touch early. I don't know. I think Google knows what they're doing, obviously, so will it be another high-profile failure? Time will only tell. But we're going to end things out today on a bit of good news, as Heavy Rain is coming to the PC. Now, David Cage is a bit of a, let's just say, divisive person. Not everyone loves his games, and they're always interesting, but they always have major issues. Like, I loved Fahrenheit back in the day, or Indigo Prophecy as it actually was called here. I actually still have my original disc of that on PS2. And obviously Heavy Rain was good, but had its problems as well. And Beyond Two Souls is obviously highly derided, and then Detroit Become Human only really had one redeeming character, but that's my personal opinion, of course. But the long story short of this is Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, and Detroit all making their way to the PC after being exclusive to PlayStation platforms for literally years, other than Detroit, which of course came out last year. Now, this is going to be, for the moment at least, exclusive to the Epic Store. Unfortunately, we don't have a release date for when this will happen, but they are expected to hit the Epic Games Store later on this year. Now, I will admit, this is probably going to get me to replay some of these games because, yeah, obviously playing them on PC is going to be better, especially if there are actually a bunch of improvements to be had, obviously being able to choose a resolution, etc. That would be actually really nice, and to be honest, this is one way to actually do exclusivity in a good way for the Epic Store, because obviously they've riled up a lot of people by getting games onto their store that were previously on Steam, like Metro and stuff like that. But let me know your thoughts in the comments, guys. Are you going to give these David Cage classics a whirl, or not? Let me know your thoughts. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.